wake up and.
I think yours.
Okay, 6:30, we'll call the meeting to order. Business is the minutes from August 30th. I hear a motion to approve them.
Sure. I'll move to approve the minutes of August 30th.
Second,
Second.
are there any corrections or alterations? No? We have a vote?
We have to do a roll call.
Oh, roll call.
You have the
Shirley.
list.
You have to do a roll call vote to approve minutes.
Yes, I should have- yeah, I forgot
Two
about
people
that.
online.
Okay.
So we'll start.
We have to roll call every vote. Jim and Dimitri.
Jim Pickett's on our committee.
Okay.
So what?
We'll start with you, Mike.
Agree.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Approve the minutes.
I wasn't.
Yeah,
Still
you
vote.
You can
You
still
still
vote.
vote.
you vote to approve.
Approve.
Aye.
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 Jim.
I am here.
We're voting,
The minutes.
we're voting to approve the minutes.
I'm sorry, I did not see the minutes.
He has not seen the minutes.
Okay.
Dimitri?
Aye. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Aye, Dimitri approves.
Okay, the first business is on the agenda is, I'd like to introduce Tim Green from Robertson Green, who's going to do our 2022 audit review.
Thank you for having me. Tim Green with Robertson Green, here to present the draft audit report for the year ended December 31st, 2022. We are very close to completion, but we're not quite there yet. But the town felt it was a good idea for me to come in anyways, and I certainly can go through everything that you will see in the final version. I tend to run through it. You can interrupt or wait till the end for questions. It's up to everyone here. It's not really a formal presentation. It's pretty casual and open-ended. The first things you hire us to do is provide this 3-page letter in the front. It's our opinion on whether or not your financial statements are fairly presented. And the town will be receiving, I can say, a clean opinion on all of the separate opinion units that the town has. Each opinion unit could have a different opinion depending on whether or not all the information is provided. A small town like Enfield, relative to the country would, it's typically, if you're doing your books the way you do, you're gonna have you have a better chance of having a clean opinion across the board. It tends to just be the first 2 statements, which are on a full accrual basis versus a modified accrual basis for the rest of the town. That you might run into a hiccup, but I don't know if the town has had an adverse opinion in the past, and if they had, it would have been because of not implementing a standard fast enough or something, but that's past history anyway. So having said that, again, it was a clean opinion across the board. Some of the format changed in the letter, but it's just to make it really clear, and it's pretty boilerplate what the town's requirements are, what they're expected to do versus what we're expected to do, what our requirements, and then as you read through it, you can see what an audit is and isn't, and so on. So within this draft, I don't even know if it's not even in your copy. Okay, the management discussion and analysis is something that the town drafts and puts in to supplement the information within the financial statements. I put in the figures to tie to the financial statements. I don't do any sort of management discussion about why a budget is over or under or what significant transactions are. So that's currently in the hands of the town. I think I just gave them the first version last week, so it hasn't been a long time. So going to the basic financial statements are these front exhibits. You have exhibit 1 and 2, which are the statement of net position and the statement of activities. This is on a full accrual basis. So here's where the town reports its capital assets, net of any depreciation. They record their long-term liabilities such as bonds and notes, capital leases, the balance of compensated absences payable to employees, And then your net pension liability and your other post-employment benefits liability. Those, along with debt, of course, those three are your significant liabilities. You also have, of course, the back 6 months of the school district. The money you collect in 2022 goes towards 2023 school year. So you always owe 6 months at the end of your year. Very bottom of exhibit 1, you can see the total net position of the town for December 31st, 2022 is almost 16 million. Of that, almost 11 million is tied up in the net invested in capital assets. So it's your capital assets minus depreciation minus any of your liabilities that are related to capital assets, and typically they all are. Every now and then you might have something that was not capitalized, or you could have unspent bonds and notes proceeds at that point in time that you wouldn't include either.
Tim,
Yes,
intergovernmental payable is,
that's the school district primarily.
thanks.
You have restricted balances, which are restricted for endowments, non-expendable and expendable. Those are monies held by the trustees of trust funds. And then you have other purposes, which is the library and any grant money that's not restricted in the sense that you have to return it. If it's grant money that you have to return, if not used, that's deferred revenue anyways, so. And then you're left with a unrestricted net position of almost $4 million. I briefly looked at the last 4 years, and that's an increase of about 400,000 in your unrestricted balance. Exhibit 2 shows you the total increase in net position was almost 850,000, but of that, the unrestricted portion was about $400,000 increase. And that's gone up the last 4 years. Exhibit 2, this is again, the statement of activities shows your expenses, and it shows various program revenues that relate to those functions, as well as your general governmental revenues, or your general revenues, excuse me. Obviously, a town primary revenue source is property taxes, and those are not targeted to any one function. That's just funding the town as a whole, so that falls under general revenues. Charges for services on this statement do include license permits and fees. So this is departmental income plus town clerk fees and town clerk revenues for motor vehicles and so on. Moving forward, exhibit 3 is your balance sheet. This is for your governmental funds. So this is a modified accrual basis. This is your general fund. Your major funds for the year were the general fund, the sewer fund, the grants fund, and the TIF district. And the expendable trust fund. So there are 5 non-major funds. And on this exhibit, you'll have an aggregate column. And I need to fix this one. The other governmental funds column, that is broken down in the back as a supplementary schedule. It's not necessarily required to be in your financial statements, but the town likes to include it.
I have another question.
Sure.
You said unrestricted balance.
Yes, on exhibit 1.
Is that what we?
No.
Okay.
No.
And where do you see that number, the 400,000 roughly?
That was a comparison from the 3.8 million on exhibit 1 to last year's. If you look at the 2021 audit, it was 3.4 roughly.
All right, I see the 3.8 down here.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
So for the general fund on exhibit 3, you can see total assets, 7.7 million, primarily made up of cash, some property tax receivables as well. And then you had total liabilities about 5.5 million. Again, 5 million of that is owed to the school. You have deferred revenue of about 450,000. That represents primarily any of that property tax receivable that hasn't been collected in 60 days after year end is considered deferred on a modified accrual basis because it's not cash in hand to use, essentially to pay your 2022 expenses. You don't have that cash by the end of February. It's not really considered recognizable. And then you're left with a total fund balance of 1.7 million. Of that, 1.566625 is your unassigned fund balance. You have some non-spendable money, which represents the tax deeded property that you're holding for resale, and some committed funds, which represent primarily balance of appropriations, special warrant articles, if you will. On exhibit 4, this basically kind of gives you a crosswalk between exhibit 3 and exhibit 1, how you go from the modified accrual to the full accrual. So you can see your modified accrual balance at the top, 7.5 million, and then all the different adjustments, if you will, that bring you to your full accrual. So you're adding $16.5 million of net capital assets. You're adding $1 million of a long-term receivable that represents the state contribution towards one or two of your debt service. They tend to do a little bit of forgiveness that gets amortized over the life of it. Your changes in how you recognize revenue, again, that added about 500,000 to your full accrual exhibits. And then you can see that just over $10 million of long-term liabilities, and then another 400,000 of deferred amounts related to pensions and OPEB. And again, because it's always a question everywhere I go, OPEB is the other post-employment benefits that represents a figure that the town hires an actuary to determine. It's two parts. It's the retirement system's actuarial determined amount of the medical subsidy that they had through 2011 or 2012. And then the town's portion of the implicit rate, which is specified by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, who says if an employee of a town, if they were to leave employment or retire, can get health insurance through the town's plan, even though it's fully paid by that employee who left town through COBRA or other means. That's an implicit benefit because they're paying a lower rate because they're pooled with all your other employees. So they're in a big pool of people versus going out and buying it themselves. So that implicit subsidy, the town is required to determine what that is, and that requires an actuarial study to say, using all their numbers on what that liability potentially is. Unfortunately, it's never a liability that you can pay off because it's implicit and it's not a cash outlay for you. Your health insurance premium is a cash outlay, but that's it.
What's the OPEB stand for in
Other post-employment benefits.
post-employment?
Exhibit 5, statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So here, again, you can see your revenues, expenditures, and other financing sources for your governmental funds. So I just jumped to the bottom, third row from the bottom on the general fund. You can see the net change in fund balances for the year was a decrease of about 111,000. The sewer had an increase of another 85,000. Grants had a decrease of 26,000. The grants fund itself is kind of being consolidated and cleaned up to really represent true grant activity. So I think in the future you will see a zero fund balance going forward because you'll only be recording revenues, expenditures as they occur and as they match up. The TIF district had an increase of about $150,000 to its fund balance. Your expendable trust funds gained about 128. And then the aggregate of the non-major funds was a decrease of 35,000 to its total fund balance. Exhibit 6 is another comparison between the two different accounting bases. This shows you how exhibits 2 and 4, or how exhibits 2 and 5 relate, excuse me. So you see you start with exhibit 5 figure of net change in total fund balances across the board of about 190. And then the differences in how, when you capitalize capital outlay and you record your depreciation expense, you have change in how revenues are recorded. There was a small bond issue this year, or for 2022. There's going to be a lot more in the future. And then you had repayments of some bonds and notes and capital leases. And then you had various changes in your compensated absences, accrued interest, and OPEB balances. And then you can see the very bottom section talks about the difference between how you're recording your pension expenses on your modified accrual versus full accrual. And that difference was actually an increase to your net position of about 165,000. Exhibit 7, this is a budgetary basis schedule for the general fund alone. You can see there's a columns for original budget and final budget. Basically, in that final budget column, you can see that there is under long-term debt issued near about 5 rows from the bottom. There is nothing in the original budget, and then there's 272,000 in the final budget. That's solely because that was something that was passed in a prior year. And so the town has authority to spend that money outside of that current year budget, so it wasn't something that 2022 had in its budget, but it is to give a true picture of your actual to budget results. You increase your budget by that previously authorized amount. The same thing happens when you have unanticipated revenues. Your budget, your final budget goes up on paper because your actual showing expenditures related to those unanticipated money that you are legally allowed to spend. So on the budgetary basis, you can see that the total revenue line, final budget was about 6.4 million. Actual was $5,000 less than that, so just under 6.4 million. I got a negative variance of $5,000 on the expenditures. Your total expenditure adjusted budget, if you will, was 6.6 million. The actual results was about 6.1, resulting in a positive unspent appropriations about 500,000. And then there's other financing sources. Transfers in was way under budget because I think that relates to some projects that haven't occurred yet. And so those transfers aren't made until those projects occur. And again, the long-term debt was issued in 2022. That was approved in a prior year.
Another question.
Yes.
In your opinion, is that variance useful as an indicator of how accurately we're budgeting?
It is on the revenue side. There's actually two objectives. I would say is my opinion on revenues. You want to be conservative because it's real quick to put yourself in a hole if you've overestimated your revenues. Whereas your appropriation side of things, you actually it's easier to overcome those. But revenues I've seen some communities get hit hard when they just make an error or something on their estimation. So in theory, a low variance represents you're accurate as far as what you think is going to happen, but your goals may not be to have a close to zero variance. Your goal may be to have a positive variance because you're being conservative. So
But we'd rather not have a negative variance in our revenues. 'Cause
that's true.
Overestimated our revenue.
Yeah, you'll have to make that up somehow.
You can control expenses.
Yeah.
You can't control revenue.
Right.
But we do watch both. Control expenses.
One of them you can't control.
So the very bottom line, the unassigned fund balance ending is just over $2 million. And there is a hidden line on there. I'm gonna fix that as well before the final draft goes out. Doesn't look like it adds up. Exhibit 8, this is a budgetary schedule for the sewer fund. It's a major fund, so you are required to put in a budget to actual if it has an adopted budget, which it does, of course. You can see your revenue estimates essentially equals your budget. And then, so your actual was under your estimated revenue. However, your actual expenditures was under your estimated expenditures as well by about 120,000. So you had a positive variance of about 85,000. The transfers out, of course, was funds to the capital reserve fund. So the fund balance for the sewer fund went from a deficit of 190,000 to a deficit of about 100,000. And that's, the sewer fund was an issue with the town about 5 years ago, and every year since the town developed the plan and started raising rates a little bit, you've seen a decrease of your deficit by a lot. So you're on pace to clean up that deficit possibly next year or the year after, or 23 or 24, I would imagine. But I also noticed your profit, if you will, has decreased every year as well. So I don't know if your expenses are catching up with your rates again or what the.
Yeah. Need to watch those rates.
So, yeah. The TIP district, also a major fund, also a fund that's appropriated. So you can see that your appropriation represents the debt service paid out of the TIP district. And the revenues represent the assessed tax for that district as well. And again, the net change in fund balance was a positive $150,000 for that fund. They have a total fund balance of 1.8 million right now. Exhibit 10 and 11, this is fiduciary exhibits. This represents private purpose trust funds and custodial funds held by the town. So private purpose trusts are held by the trustees, custodial as well. Custodial tends to be any money for the school district. Actually, in this case too, as well, this was the first year that the Upper Valley Prosecutorial Association was added to the town. The town now manages, manages not the right way, the town holds the checkbook, if you will. So that is reported under the custodial fund. Not a lot of activity in your private purpose trust, as you can see. And again, the custodial fund, the town does not have a lot of control over what it's used for. They do have some escrow type funds, developer fees and so on that run through there as well. The notes, I don't go through the notes, but I can answer questions if anyone had come up with any while they were browsing through. One note that Elisa and I spent a lot of time on this year would be the debt service notes. There are on page 34, hopefully it's the same number for you guys. This is a draft. Yes. There's a note, says bonds authorized but unissued. So this is where the town's tried to summarize all of its previously passed authority to borrow and what's remaining unissued. Now, there are some additional notes below that. There's discussion about a line of credit that was open for the public safety facility during 2022, as well as in 2023, there was a line of credit open for the town offices and library renovations. It was my opinion that the town present the total as unissued, as drawdowns don't necessarily represent. The town has entered into an agreement, obviously, to pay back those funds. However, they haven't drawn them down. So until that's converted to that truly bottom line, here's what you owe back, it's reported as unissued. And again, try to make it very clear that the town's starting to use it and so on, and they have the authority to borrow. They have a line of credit now, so the funds are available to the town as needed.
Have a note for you. Missing dollar signs.
Thank you. Those are the new ones. So then I'll jump to required supplementary information. On page 44, this is exhibits 12, 13, 14, and 15. This is just a schedule of various balances related to the pension liability and the OPEB liability. The town is required to show 10 years of data. So as soon as you reach your 10 years, the pension you're at, you're now showing 9 years, so you're getting close. You'll just do a rolling 10-year comparison schedule. OPEB, you've only got 4 years so far of data to show. So you'll continue to add one until you reach 10. These supplementary schedules are exhibits 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. 16 and 17, this is a detailed schedule of your non-major funds. You can see that the town's non-major funds are the water fund, the library fund, the conservation commission, the capital project fund, and the permanent fund. Total fund balance for the water fund is $376,000. The library, has about $500,000 in fund balance, which is restricted, of course, to the library. The conservation commission has about $16,000. In the capital project fund, there's a restricted and non-spendable balance. Non-spendable represents the prepaid amount. The debt service that's paid out of that fund. One of them is paid on January 1st, or it's due on January 1st every year. So paying it in December so that you're not late is actually a prepaid item. But every year you do have that debt service shown as expenditures as well.
Is that the one that we think of as the CIP fund?
Yes. It is. I believe it is, yes.
What is this permanent fund?
Permanent fund is trust funds. That is perpetual care, other types of trust funds where there is an endowment or something that's non-expendable portion and then an expendable portion. But the use of those funds can benefit the town as a whole. So like the cemetery, anyone can go into the cemetery roughly. But if it's like a scholarship fund, that doesn't benefit the town as a whole, that benefits individuals, specifically, and those are fiduciary funds. So those are private purpose because they're not for everyone. They're only available to the student. Whereas maintaining the cemeteries benefits the town as a whole. And that's a permanent fund because there's a permanent portion that you cannot touch.
I do have a question. The capital project fund, is that not the Lakeview or the Route 4A sewer extension? The 05 capital projects fund?
It is.
Oh, okay. So that's not the capital reserve
The
fund.
IP fund.
Okay, that's what, oh, yeah.
So that's
So
where
it's
the,
not the CIP.
No,
it's not the CIP fund.
1.6.
That is,
It's a
we
big
keep
fund.
the Lakeview, Route 4A sewer extension separate.
We'll put not in front of CIP.
So the CIP is capital reserve.
That's a capital
Fund.
reserve.
Capital reserve.
Okay, so that would be within the expendable trust fund,
Yeah,
but there are more than just the CIP fund, I imagine, yeah.
no, it's about 1.5 per year.
Exhibits 18, 19, and 20 are more detailed general fund budgetary exhibits. So you have more breakdown of the budget, the estimated revenues and the actual revenues, as well as your appropriations. You carried forward, you encumbered from 2021, so there was a total encumbered from the prior year, about 138,000, and then carried forward to 2023 was about 125,000. That's the first column and second to last column. Finally, exhibit 20. This is a good breakdown of fund balance, of your unassigned fund balance. The town started the year just over 2 million. Voted as part of the tax rate setting, they used 280,000 to reduce the tax rate or to maintain the tax rate. There's a revenue shortfall about 250,000. There's an unexpended balance of appropriations of just over 500,000 and a budget surplus of 273,000. Primarily the revenue shortfall, as we noticed earlier, what represented the transfers in, and you can basically correlate the part of your unexpended balance of appropriations to essentially the same amount, because you didn't transfer in any money because you didn't spend any money. So you're under your revenues, but you're also under your appropriations. And then all the other minor variances as noted. And then there's some minor increases in an increase in non-spendable fund balance and a decrease in rear restricted, which represents a corresponding increase or decrease in unassigned fund balance. So you can see you ended at just over 2 million. So it was a real minor change of about $1,000. And that's obviously $1,000 higher than the year before. 2 years ago, you were about 1.6 million, so it's a $400,000 increase. 3 years ago, 2019, you're about at 1.1 million. So to give you an idea of where you've come from and where you've gone.
I wanted to add to that, if you guys remember, we were trying to grow to our 12% and we're pretty much there. So we really should be leveling that out and not continuing to grow that too much.
And is that what we're seeing here? This $1,000 increase is effectively level.
Yeah, that's pretty much
That's where we
level.
want to be. Is
We're pretty close. I think we're just under the 12, but we've started really watching it. We're bringing some things down and we'll be, like we talked last year, we'll just be working off the year before's numbers as we're funding for the next year now, because we're at that point where we're pretty close to our goal.
And in previous years, we would have seen this $1,000 would have been 400,000 or
That's what it had been.
Okay. Just making sure I'm looking at the right box, seeing how that's changing.
Yeah, so the budget was pretty spot on.
Yeah, I mean, so when you vote to use unassigned fund balance, you're essentially saying we're gonna lose 280,000 for the year. So if you recoup that through your budget surplus, then you're on the right path anyways, I would argue. The last page is our communication to management. I always put one in even if there's nothing to communicate, and that's what this letter is. If there's minor, we will, as we're doing the field work, we will certainly point out to staff if there's something that they can improve upon that's not materially significant to an issue that's going on in the town, but we always will make a recommendation to if we see something that can be fixed or changed. I know right when we were there in February for the field work, and there had been a transition as far as your finance coordinator position or whatever the title is. So cash reconciliation has been a problem. It's always been a bit of a challenge as far as time and accuracies in this town. And I know that they're still going through some change there and struggling with that. So we'll see how that goes next year. Obviously, it's important to reconcile your cash accounts. That's your key driver. And just making sure things are always have a second set of eyes on something like that, like reconciliations are approved and so forth. I always do draft a letter, fairly template looking to the Board of Selectmen after the audit process is complete. But I thought I could point out a couple things within that letter this year that you'll see, and it's primarily, I highlight the large adjustments that we propose to the town. We always propose every, our term is misstatement. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means here's a correction that we recommend you do. And the town always implements those changes when they get them from us. So some of the significant adjustments, and these are typical that we see in other towns and as well as in Enfield. The town always reports its taxes gross, so you have your full tax revenue representing the tax commitment. And then you have payments to the school and county as a expense on the bottom. The town technically only reports its town portion, so we net that out. So there's a big difference if you look at a report from the town versus our report, and that's the chunk of it is primarily because of that. We found an AP item. Generally, we find the fourth quarter sewer from the city is pretty late as far as when the town received it, so we get that so that you're properly accruing it in the period that that the expense occurs. And the same thing goes with fourth quarter water and sewer billings. We make sure that the fourth quarter, which may go out in February, is into 2022, and the fourth quarter from the beginning of 2022 was in the previous year. So there's always that adjustment. The way that a lot of state aid came in and federal aid, ARPA, the extra highway block grant, extra bridge aid, all that money is essentially is considered a grant money. So that means you don't record the revenue until you spend it. So there's a lot of deferrals. Most of it's reported in your grants fund, separate from the general fund. But again, those were significant adjustments just because it was a significant amount of money. And most communities just put that in revenue and then figured out what to do with it. But the proper accounting wise is to move it to deferred revenue and then just record it to match your expenses when those occur. And then again, we're there in February, so the town doesn't know what the 60-day rule number is, meaning you don't know what your deferred tax receivable is until the end of February. So when we get a report from the town at the end of February, we just give you the proposed entry to correct that. So those are the highlights of a future communication that you'll be seeing.
Could I ask one question back on Exhibit 12?
Sure.
The line, town's proportionate share of the net pension liability as a percentage of covered employee payroll. Those numbers vary about 150% to 200%. That's a little higher than I would have thought intuitively. Is that typical for other towns?
Yes, it is, because that liability figure that the state put out is much more significant than your annual contributions are. It's also can vary even with that small percentage change in what your proportionate share is. It can be a big change as well to your books. Because
Okay.
It's a big number, the big liability as a total.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
The capital reserves, we're still carrying those at the gross amount, not recognizing the loss from the basically going bankrupt.
Right. It's a small,
I mean, it's gotta be $200,000 or $300,000.
I'd have to double check that. I think that it's been, I think it's more at the cost at this point. I'd have to look though.
Okay, only because I've got the thing from today that said the fund is 2.575 million, but the available to spend is only 2.2 million.
Okay.
I guess my question would be, at what point are we going to recognize that loss? Because that would have a large effect on the undesignated, because I suspect it would affect the undesignated to that amount. Because that's the only place you could.
I don't know if that issue is completely finalized yet.
But I mean, it's been 10 or 12 years now.
Well, that's
At some
true,
point,
and
you've got to
there was stuff
recognize it.
trickling in, so
Yeah,
there
but it's-
may or
right.
may not be something that comes in until it's fully settled.
Yeah,
It's not gonna be a lot.
yeah, that's what I mean. $300,000 drop in the undesignated would be a large hit. And that's the only place it can go, because it's gonna have to come out of it's gonna have to be come to the bottom line.
Yeah, I know that we just ask, we get the letters that the town gets, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That says the status and if
Right, I mean,
it's not, if they're not saying it's, they haven't given up, so.
no. But his house was only worth so much. And that was his major asset.
Inflation.
Is it in the budget committee's purview to recommend recognizing that?
No, that would be up to the select board. That would actually be up to the auditors to recognize it.
Well, no, I agree. It'd be up to the board. If the board felt if we would just evaluate whether that was the right move or not, but I'm sure there would be a reason behind the decision, so.
We can talk about that a little bit more and we'll talk and see what we think may be coming and we can have that discussion with.
I mean,
the
even
board
if you
and try to
recognize
time
it
it right.
10% per year until you, because within the next 10 years, hopefully, it'll be at a finality.
And that might be a good way to do it if that's something we
Right.
could do is write off a certain amount
Right,
every year for a while.
recognize
so
a
it doesn't
portion of the loss.
hit at that big.
So otherwise
If we did
we're right back where
100,000 a
we
year for
were.
3 years.
Way
Yeah.
away from our
Yeah,
12%,
I look into that.
Right.
Yeah.
suddenly.
That's a nice idea.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Are there any more questions?
Is this in fact for 22 or is this for 23?
It's
Pretty cool.
We're still spending.
23's not done.
Yeah, you can't really audit
You can't
23.
audit it, we're doing it.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Nice to see you again. Next item on the agenda is a review of capital reserve and trust funds.
So we really just wanted to hand this out so you guys had it and saw it. Last year, there was some questions, I think, kind of as we were ending budget season of what was available. So we just wanted to make sure to get this in front of people to not only know what's in there, but also help us as we get in the throes of budgeting to go, hey, didn't we have money here that could cover that expense or something like that? So just wanted to hand them out, let you know what they were. We can talk about them if you want to talk about some. I think some of these we need to discuss a little bit more at the select board level to see if they're ones we want to continue to have on the books or not. I think a lot of it changed when we switched to the CIP and grew some of that. So there's some funds standing out there that we're spending money from the CIP on those items and we still have a capital reserve sitting in returns.
And do you know the municipal facilities maintenance and equipment capital reserve fund? Was that access to do some of the small repairs on Whitney years ago when we did that? Is that what was used? Trying to remember.
I'm not 100%.
Purpose.
No, it's behind there.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just wondering if that's what was used when they did it. When I'm thinking about whether something's, because you're right, a lot of this stuff is covered by CIP and doesn't.
Yeah.
But the short-term fixie,
Right.
like hole in the
Yeah.
roof stuff.
Yeah.
I can see where that's having some money there to go. We gotta replace that window now. Has some value and I thought that they did do some work on Whitney and then it wasn't in the budget. So maybe it came out of undesignated, but maybe it came out of this.
Okay. Let's board us left.
So
Agent, do it right on that.
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm fairly certain that there was a warrant article. I think it's the DPW facility improvement that had not happened. I mean, we did the
Yeah.
exhaust system in the base, but the rest of it hasn't been done. About 4,000 of that fund is
Is-
earmarked for that. So there's really, you only have
Yeah.
10,000 available for any other expense.
There's 4,500 available this time.
Oh, well,
Right,
then
you
you
got
have
that
nothing.
But if you look at the
It
fire
was like
vehicle,
4,400 or something.
getting back to the point about writing stuff off, it shows $50,000 in there, but only 2,700 is available because the rest of it was a part of the bankruptcy of the
Yeah.
the guy. Because at the time, there was about 400,000 in there and we spent
Maybe we write
350
some
of
of these
it
off. and-
on the first fire truck. But we spent 350,000 of the original 400,000 on the first fire truck 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
That's why it shows such a big difference between what's available and what's in there.
Don't they call it the Freddy truck?
The one that was too big for the shed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Field center goes out twice a year for a parade.
So we can do that, and as we get deeper
Yeah.
into this, we can have a discussion if you guys, I mean, I would take your recommendation if you wanna recommend kind of doing away with some of these, maybe we use that 50,000 to write off part of that 300,000, so it's not affecting fund balance, and it's.
And it's an accurate
That we're really
representation
not-
now.
Well, it's only gonna be hitting you for $25,000 or $30,000 a year. As opposed to at the end, when you decide, then you're gonna have to take a $300,000 hit in 1 year.
Yeah. But if it's written into some of these reserves, they're still on the books as reserves.
Right,
You write it off there, it doesn't hit your undesignated
Right.
fund balance. It's something you're not really paying
Right.
attention to, you have anyway, so
right,
it's a hit, but it's not a big hit that way. And
right.
so that might be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
So maybe we analyze these a little closer as we get nearer to the end of the budget season.
I think it's a good idea to take proactive steps to clean it up and not wait. And then do it all at once.
I agree.
Mhm. So the next thing on the agenda is the 2023 expense and revenue review.
We'll go through that a little bit. You guys got a revenue report the other day, and an email, and then we gave you a new one.
The new one does not differ in the numbers at all, but so those of you online are it's going to look a little different, same numbers. We have a much nicer, cleaner report that you'll get in the future.
So we were playing with the report, talking back and forth what we'd like to see on there. I'm gonna work off the new one, so sorry for those people online. I'll take questions in a minute, but the main thing that I really wanted to highlight, because it made me nervous at first, was on the revenue report, not the appropriation report. When I flipped to that second page, it showed the balance to collect was $2.5 million of our 3.6. But if you look at the new one, we put in there the interfund operating transfers that need to happen. They haven't happened. That's 1.57 million, little over that, I'm rounding. You take that out, it's 941,000. The other big thing that we haven't got yet that we get at the end of the year is meals and rooms, which is, we estimated 350. I do expect we're gonna get more than that. But 350,000 in revenue, and then rest of our block grant at 53,000 something. That brings us down to 538,220. And then if we take the clerk fees, make them average amount for the quarters that they've done, it's looking like we'll get another 269,761, which leaves all the other revenues in town needing to collect $268,000. So pretty much, long story short, I think we're on track to get our revenues back. But when I first looked at that yesterday, I was like, uh-oh, we got a major problem. But once you do the math and you break it all down, it looks like we're on track. I kind of did the same thing on the expenditure report, went through, looked at everything. If you just jump bottom lines, we should be about 25% left of the year going through. So it makes it an easy way to kind of see department by department where we're at and fund by fund. For the most part, we are on track. There's a few of them where there's been some over expenditures, but nothing that really rises to my attention as something that's gonna be a problem. We have had some, you'll see individual lines that are down. The ones that I had concerns about, I highlighted today, and Elisa was able to answer all of those satisfactorily. We do have some lines that are negative right now from some miscoding and things that we've seen. I don't want to make any excuses, but we did just switch from AccuFund on the server to AccuFund online. We've had about 3 months now of things not working quite right going through. As the auditor pointed out, for some years, reconciling hadn't been happening correctly. We transferred our software. When our new accountant started to do the reconciling, she found that that was partially reconciled from like 3 years ago, which stopped her in her tracks to be able to reconcile. We just got that fixed with our software company, and she's gonna be looking for some training so she doesn't do something wrong moving forward, that makes sure she knows how to use that software. So we are working on that. They've done the kind of hand reconciling, if you will, taking bank statements, looking at our software, and you know, they're pretty comfortable. We're in a good spot right now, but they do want to get all that data into the computer as much as possible. And we'll be moving on, and next year, for sure, starting January 1, we'll be reconciling monthly going forward. So
This is a scary number, the 5.4 million balance to collect.
oh, on the taxes,
Yeah, on the revenue. I'm behind you.
that's it's probably because it hasn't been issued yet.
No, the total revenues I'm seeing. Balance to collect total revenues is 5.4 million behind. 2.5 of that is not taxes, so.
Yeah, and the rest will be issued taxes and will come in. Our tax, last time I checked, it has been a while, but we were like 98% collected on taxes. So we're doing well in that front. We haven't had much of a problem with that. We
Haven't had to take anybody's land in a while either, right?
No, this year we had 5 or 6 of them that we authorized through the select board, and they all got paid in full before they went to tax due. So
So,
it's, taxes are getting paid. We do have a few that we have to chase, but I've worked for a few towns now, and there's a lot less here that I'm chasing than other towns. So
And just to be clear, on the revenue report, when it's a negative number, that means it's a good thing. It's a little backwards on the revenue report.
We're showing the cost of the renovations of Whitney Hall and the safety building at 139,000 coming out of the general fund at this point. When does that begin to get drawn down from the approved mortgages?
there'll be
When do we begin to tap the bank for that money?
we'll be tapping them soon. We're trying to hold it as much as possible. I've been really watching cash in the bank, which I checked again today, and total, we have multiple funds, but total, we're at like $6.2 million in the bank.
Does that,
So if I can,
if we don't take
hold off
it,
some
it affects the
interest.
unrestricted fund balance for the close of the year?
No. No, and we'll make sure that they're in the right accounts. We did start accounts for those funds, and they'll be not in the general fund. They should be transferred into their correct funds.
Well, I
Is that-
think the 138 is in the 08 fund, which
Yes,
is
the
just,
08 fund
that's
is
just
not
to
the
track,
general fund.
that's not the general fund. That's just to track our expenses against the loan proceeds that we're gonna have.
And that is another thing I wanted to point out. He talked about it a little bit, but when I got here, a lot of the grants, we were just kind of trying to track them through everything. I have worked with an Elisa, and we put any really unexpected revenue, ARPA funds, those types of things, we put into a grant fund so they can be tracked separately. We will continue to do that. So it makes it a lot easier on our side. Every once in a while, we do get a miscoding thing, but we usually catch it and pull it over, but so those are tracked individually as their own, so we can know at this point, you can look at those numbers and know that that's what we've spent out of that project so far. Mostly, almost primarily architectural fees.
I'm sorry if I'm being obtuse, but. And if you already covered this, you can just tell me. I'm back up at the top of the revenue report, and I see the same numbers, positive and negative, in year-to-date actual and balance to collect. taxes. Is there a brief explanation for that?
You don't budget for property
Didn't budget.
taxes, so you always are going to have a balance to collect of negative when you have any revenue at all. So we brought in 7.9 million, so that we have
With a budget of 0.
with a budget of 0.
So the negative 5.4 is I don't look at number because $7.5 million of revenue was never budgeted.
You're better off looking at the total above that, which is the total
Right.
revenues excluding the property taxes.
Right.
Why don't we budget the tax? I should know this after so many years here, but
Because the tax rate is set separately. It's
By
just-
DRA, we
by
don't budget that.
Yeah, we don't, it's
Right.
not a budget.
We set the expenditure budget and what we think we're gonna get from revenues, and they do magic over there in Concord and say, here's what you have to.
This makes up the difference.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, because they don't set it until after town meeting,
They don't, yeah, they'll set it in November.
but that's for this year.
Right, so this year, they'll take all the
Right.
revenues you see here and estimate it at what we think they're gonna be at the year
Right.
end. And then figure out how much we have to raise in taxes to make up the difference to meet our budget.
Exactly. For the
thank you,
first,
Lisa.
for the first issue. Basically, because
Wow.
the June issue is after town meeting where you get another number.
That's, the first issue tax bill is based on half of the prior year.
Right,
So we consider it a prepayment,
right,
so you'll just be fully taxed. We'll
Right.
figure out the tax rate at the end of the year as if it's for the full year.
right.
Subtract your prepayment, that's
Yeah.
what you owe.
Right, instead of having like it used to be where you just
Right.
get with
Right,
the full boat in
Right.
December.
yeah.
I was gonna say, so they set the tax rate in November.
That's what I'm saying, is they set the tax rate in November. Using this year's numbers, not next year's numbers.
Right.
And even that 2.5 million isn't as scary as it looks because 1.5 of that is gonna come from other funds.
Yeah, and they'll be dollar for
Right.
dollar transfers.
Yeah,
So we know that figure, we just
Yeah.
haven't made the transfer yet.
So we're actually looking at about $1 million.
Yeah, and like I said, with that, 350 or more thousand is meals and rooms tax that we will get, but they don't pay us till the end of the year.
right,
53,000 of it's block grant that we will get. It just comes in quarterly payments, I believe, and we have one more payment to come. And then we have pretty good sense of quarterly, how much we get through the clerk's office, and about 289, 260 to 289, I have the number written down. We estimate to come if we average what we're getting per quarter so far. So it brings us down to about 268,000 for the rest of the year that we have to bring in other revenues, marriage licenses and all those other things.
And that's doable, you think?
Yeah, I think we're on track to get that. We just went through with the DRA on our revenues, looking at recreation and all those little revenues places coming in, and I think we'll be pretty close.
So you said 350 meals and
That's what we budgeted, 350. I do believe we'll get more than that. We try to
what was
budget
the,
that conservatively.
what was the next number you said? Block grant was
Yeah,
50 or 60?
Let me get
The
the
Highway
actual
block
number.
grant that shows up just below that.
Yeah, 53,000.
3,000 is the balance to collect. That's what we anticipate.
A little over that.
I see that.
53, 163, 48 is what we should get.
And you estimated from the clerk,
269,761. If I take the first 3 quarters and average those, that's the number that we get. So
right around 270.
somewhere in that range, yeah.
So 5.
Leaves about 268.
So that's what we might be looking at as a shortfall.
We'll make
Right.
a pretty good chunk of that. 15,000 of it of land use change tax just got billed. So we should get that back, and I just didn't want to go through all those small numbers trying to figure out. And we're pretty much on track, and I think we'll be pretty close by the end of the year.
I know that's the third time you've had to say that. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, I went through it 3 or 4 times, making sure I wrap my brain around everyone and felt.
And we all benefited.
I'm a little tense.
We still don't seem to be collecting much on ambulance, though.
No. We're not billing much on ambulance.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying in a roundabout way.
Because we're not responding a lot by ambulance.
Right. So we probably ought to budget lower next year.
Yeah, we'll watch that.
So there are calls, but we can't respond, or there aren't as many calls.
There's calls, but Lebanon's responding to more of them.
Right.
We're discussing that.
Right.
I want that new fire station.
But it does, I mean, the revenue income may not be there, but when you look at the expense side, it's sixes, whether it goes to Lebanon or
Right,
payroll. But
right.
we're still within budget
Yeah.
that way, but the revenue.
But we're just not, we're not billing.
Yeah.
Wonder if people call up and say, I want the Enfield Fast Squad to respond and not Lebanon.
You might be waiting.
I know, I'm just saying. You need to schedule your ambulance visits, that's all.
It'll be about the same as scheduling your doctor.
Yeah. Schedule my ambulance pickup for next week, please.
Are there any other questions? So we'll move on to public comments. Any more public comments, Jason?
A small piece on the ambulance. One of the philosophical thoughts on the ambulance is that when the emergency services building is complete, it will attract people who need to volunteer for the ambulance that we're not getting right now. So the hope is that we can build back the crew, the volunteers who man the ambulance. Once we have the new building, once we have the new facility, it'll become attractive to people, EMTs who want to participate. Perhaps future policemen who have an EMT certification will want to participate. And so we'll be able to respond more.
I will say on the administrative side, we're working on many plans that could possibly help with that. And some of it is looking at training police officers, firefighters, and incentivizing them to respond not only on duty, but off duty to help that out and to bolster our ambulance services. We're also having conversations with Lebanon and other towns on how we can regionalize and do things a little bit differently and better. So we will continue having that discussion and moving that forward.
Right, just as a side note, I know last meeting we talked about employee retention, pay, all that. Saw an ad for Lebanon.
Yep.
For a certified police officer, they're offering a $30,000 sign-on bonus.
You gotta stay.
It's like, yeah, right,
Newport's doing the same thing and
Yeah.
they can't get an applicant.
yeah.
They can't,
I'll apply.
the fact of the matter is I can tell you the state is losing a juvenile probation and parole officer every month. People are leaving, the troopers are leaving, people are just, and I think that might be part of your medic thing too. It, you know, you put a value on exposing yourself to trauma and things like that, and you go, do I really wanna do this?
Right.
And it's not just money. That's why I had said childcare, offer childcare, you'll get people. It's things like that, but new shiny police station probably helped too.
It'll help. We're looking at a bonus program, not $30,000.
No,
But things to attract the applicant to get them here and
Lebanon has a lot of other stuff. They have CALIA certification and things like that they can boast about, but people also don't stay there. That's the truth. Even with the money, they move on.
No, but it will be incumbent on you as a group to again look very seriously at the program for increasing wages this year. Even though you've heard nationally that things are calming down, our people are key, and it will be very important for you as a group to look carefully at what you want to allow for the future growth of
Well,
the wage base.
The state is giving 2.5%.
Yeah.
For
And that may be
2024.
and that may be the floor.
They gave 10 for 2023 and then 2.5 for 2024.
That was 12%.
I think I wish they had broken it up as 6 and 6, because I think that would be, but it was when everybody thought the governor was gonna run for president, to be honest. But it is not great. I think that it's not just the wages, it's
Yeah.
other things.
Mhm.
It's the package.
And people get creative. Some places it's pet insurance. Some places it's remote work. It takes more than just dollars now to get people to sign in.
Time off's a really big one right now.
Yep.
Our police chief is looking very hard
I'm
at
off.
people who may not necessarily live in Enfield. Because it's not like a policeman who he hires is gonna move into someplace in Enfield. There's nothing to be found.
No, we just had one from Hartford that wanted to rent the apartment from my parents.
Yeah.
And he's gonna bring his cruiser from Hartford to New Hampshire.
And our
Like-
police chief is trying to be flexible with that sort of thing as necessary as well. So he's looking very hard to find people, and they aren't necessarily going to be an Enfield resident. Because you have to be flexible. You have to be prepared to deal with a possible applicant if you can.
And with that, I will segue. We have gotten the draft of the compensation plan, so I've
Cool.
talked with PayPoint HR. I will be inviting the select board, but they have it on their schedule to attend your next meeting and present the compensation plan to you, so. I think compensation was on the schedule anyway, but I will modify the schedule as needed to make sure we have time to discuss that in detail.
Yeah.
It was exactly what he said it was. We have a few employees that are pretty far behind on the pay scale. We have actually quite a few that are really close to being paid right. And a few that are paid over. I think overall, we were right in that 2 to 2.5% range behind as a town, which really isn't bad. We're pretty close to on payroll, but there are a few employees that are quite a ways behind, and we'll discuss those. I don't know if I'll have it ready for you next meeting, but we'll be looking through that and making a plan to present to you on how I think we can get caught up and how we can do it over maybe a 2 or 3 year time span, so we're not just hitting the taxpayers at one time.
I thought I heard you say the select board will come to our next meeting and present it.
The select board won't present it. I'm gonna invite them to it, so the PayPoint HR people can only present it once instead of twice.
Yeah, but that'll be at our next meeting.
That's your next meeting.
Okay.
Planning.
Thank
Do
you.
you know if not understanding completely how we do things here for pay, but do we have salary steps for folks?
We have not, but I've been working with them to do a grade and steps system so we can get back to that.
Yeah, the state is switching to the SOC, Standard Occupational Code system, but one of the things that they did is what hasn't been ratified yet is they added some additional steps. So your people that are your 20-year people that have all this knowledge, but have maxed out, they can never make any more. They said you need to put in a couple more steps, so those people stay and.
We just had this discussion the other day, and I created a step and grade system for the town of Weathersfield. And one of my big things is you don't necessarily have a max, but the increases slow down when you get up there. And I think we should continue to reward our long-term employees because there's a lot of knowledge and experience there. The other thing I'm a big benefit or a big proponent of is those first 3 to 5 years, you ramp up pretty big because your employees get much more valuable every year during that time frame. And so I'd like to take what they gave us, modify it slightly to build that ramp and then to build a steady increase so people can see where they're going. Another thing in a town of our size with the staffing that we have is there's not much of a career ladder in each department. So being able to build those steps in and see that you can do it. And I'm also working with DPW and the police to maybe even create what I'm gonna call in-between grades. So, maybe a lieutenant and a captain position where we only have one of those filled, but we can promote a lieutenant, they can do training experience and move to the captain position. So
Dimitri has some input.
go ahead, Dimitri.
So in my current organization, when you're maxed out, they give you your raise as a bonus, meaning you still get something, but it doesn't, it's no longer cumulative. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so it's not like you get nothing, but it no longer becomes like cumulative like interest is. But it's not like you get nothing. So that's another thing you could think about.
bonuses aren't usually done in public employment, but I can see what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we've looked at is just that reason that you do, and honestly, the people who it hurts the most a lot of your times are secretaries. Who they max out, they're in the lower labor grade and they max out. And they're the meat and potatoes of the operation. And then they have nowhere to go.
Well, and if you look at HR surveys,
Administrative assistant.
Right, except someplace else.
if you look at HR surveys and stuff, pay is actually down near like number 10 of why people leave jobs. And number one's usually their supervisor, but number two or three is where they think they can go in the organization and what it looks like. And just the subconscious thought of you're maxed out, you can't go any farther.
Right.
That'll push you out.
Just pushes you out. Yeah, it pushes you down or you're not happy. So, I'd like
grow or
to
go.
do something where there's
Right.
ways that they can grow their pay. And I like to try to build it in a way, like I was talking with DPW, where there's some experience and training and different things they can do that's gonna benefit the organization, and they have control of moving through the organization. And it may not be a promotion to the next step, but they have ways that they can earn some extra pay that way. So we'll be working on that. I don't know that that'll come out in this year's step grade
Yeah.
thing, but we'll put that together and I'll continue working with them to make those kind of in between steps and give them somewhere to move.
Well, it allows you also to have something that people who are, someone who is in, Grantham is looking at Enfield and they go, so if I'm a this in that town, I get like, and people do that. They compare, well, so I would be a step this and, all right, well, so that really is that. And they look, okay, I would be a labor grade 26, step 5 under their schedule, but I would still have 3 more to go for the next 10 years till I retire.
Do any of these plans have like a base rate? That's all those steps and then a time and grade? Or a time and,
That's kind of the way
Employment.
they're set up is the grades or
so you're,
there is where the different positions are. And then there's steps, which theoretically are years in service, but it gives you the ability to negotiate with new employees to be a little farther based on their experience or education. It gives you that opportunity when someone just does a stellar job to say, you know what, we're gonna jump a step or two and make sure that you're compensated for that. Or we can do something like Dimitri said. I did that last year. We had one employee that really went above and beyond to help the town, and we gave him like $1,000 bonus about Christmas time to just let him know that we appreciated the extra work above and beyond.
That's good, because it's hard to be on the same increase as another person that you see isn't doing what you're doing. I think that's hard for people.
So
Yeah, this person actually stepped out. He was in DPW and he was teaching other drivers. He taught them, he helped them get the CDL, and he ended up saving the town $6,000 or $7,000 because we didn't have to send him to class. And he did that not on his own time, but outside of his job grade. And I felt it was something worth saying, hey, thank you for doing it.
and that's where the money is less important than, the recognition and that you're valued. And nobody likes to work where nobody thinks they're right, so when they get the pay will be determined also, like if they get additional training and education and.
Yeah,
things
we're
like
gonna
that,
look
right?
in training and education. In the DPW side anyway, we've really talked about almost setting up a standard program where you're this step and you wanna move here, you have to get these 4 classes and you have to understand or be
Yeah.
able to show competency in this equipment or something like that. And then we'll give them that next step. And there's gonna be a time factor to that too. They can't just right through it. But, you know, once you hold this position this long, take these classes and do this. We'll do that.
What the
But we don't
state,
have that built yet.
what the state does with steps is the first 5 you can get every year. After that, it's every 3. So you go from 5 to 9, it's every 3 years you go up. Now they're gonna switch it back to 2. But the idea is as you get higher up, those increases come every 2 years rather than every year, but you still can get them, right? It's not, you're still gonna get there.
I've always done it the other way where you still get it every year, but that percentage starts going.
It's not, it's.
And as you get higher on the
Yep.
pay scale, that smaller
Smaller
percentage
becomes
is still a decent
It's a
dollar
big-
value.
Yes,
Exactly.
yeah.
You know, they
And-
don't need 5% when the new person getting 5% because it's a lot more money.
Will it show, you know, like time off is important, as you said. So as you work your way up, maybe your percentage is smaller, but you get another day or 2 off a year.
They get that
Yeah,
already.
okay.
Vacation goes up every so many years.
Okay.
The
Is it
big one,
annually? I think we still have it annually. We talked about doing it in like 3 or 5 year blocks, but it started getting really cumbersome on making the transition, so we still do it annually, but it's a small increase every year on time off. The one thing we did switch last year was from, here's your vacation in January to monthly accrual.
Mhm.
So they monthly accrual, when it hits their paycheck, this is what you have. There's no, oh, you're leaving early, we have to take this back, any of that we have to worry about. So we had made that switch last year and then we just put a cap on vacation instead of having what you can carry over. There is no more carryover. When you hit this amount, you stop accruing till you use some vacation then.
So if I earn do you earn by days or hours?
Hours.
It's hours
Oh,
now.
okay, so, at the end of the year, can I carry my sick leave over into the next year?
Sick leave is carried over and there's a max that you can earn.
Okay,
And then we did the same thing on vacation. Instead of having any carryover, we just put a max accrual. So let's just say 300 hours, that's just out of it. But you accrue, and this is probably more than some, but 10 hours a month. When you hit 300 hours, you stop accruing till you take some vacation, then you start accruing again. And
Is there-
that takes what I found, if you do the big lump sum and you have carryovers, is every year I got employees in my office saying, I was too busy, I couldn't take vacation, or this
Yeah.
person quit and I had to stay and do this, and
Yeah.
now you're trying to pick and choose who you're gonna let carry extra and not. This gets rid of all of that. That's your number when it stops. Or what I've found is they don't get to that number. When it starts getting close, they go, oh, I'm gonna take a day off.
Yeah.
Do we do personal days?
We do 3 personal days per person per year.
Pretty good.
do those accrue?
No, use them or lose them, and people know, they use those first
Yeah.
before vacation.
Most people do.
The thing is,
Oh, I never had it.
because I know somebody that didn't take their vacation a lot, but because there was always an emergency at work for their position. So then they had a huge amount and they weren't allowed to roll it over. So they left. Because, and then, okay, now they're finding out they need to hire 2 people to replace this person. So now they're like, wanna come back and talk to us again about that time, you know? So there are certain situations where, and you know, particularly in DPW, you get the flooding and the roads out and so on, and maybe they're supposed to take their vacation and you don't want them to say, sorry, gotta go on my vacation now.
Yeah.
You
Well,
want
that's
them
part
to
of the
come
reason
in.
we made the change.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
really easy to manipulate around now. We don't have carryover anymore, so
Yeah.
there's no, you're not carrying over vacation.
No, but I'm saying like for the
If
300
there's a
hours.
big, huge thing, then we'll
Yeah.
deal with it, but you're talking at that point, you know what, I'll let you carry this into next month, but you need to take a day off. I mean, they don't have to take a
How
3 week.
how many hours is
vacation.
it? So, is it a lot?
It depends where you're at on the
Oh,
scale,
okay.
you know, when they
I have
come
like
in. it
400
starts-
hours of vacation time.
I think
and
that's
I haven't
about-
taken it.
I think that's about where our more senior people max out.
Yeah.
When we started
A lot.
40 hours of
I mean,
vacation the first year, that's another thing I changed. Instead of waiting a year to get your vacation, you start accruing immediately, because new employees need vacation too.
Right.
It's
So,
hard learning a
Oh, that's
new
right.
job, so you need a
40 hours. a week.
break
400
sometimes
hours.
just to
Yeah.
get reoriented.
40 hours in a year when you start. So you get 1 week of vacation the first year. I think the second year it goes to 2 weeks.
We could max out at 240 hours, I think, and carry that indefinitely.
So we can do that. Our more senior people that have been here a long time, I think, earn up to 5 weeks of vacation, which is quite a bit.
Our company does something interesting, not that I wouldn't propose it. We don't have, time off. We can, I can tell my boss, I said, I need to take a week off. And the rule from HR basically is you arrange your time off with your manager, get your project work done. If you can do that and take 6 months off, that's fine. That's probably an
Yeah,
extreme
really count.
example.
Yes, it is.
That'd be a nightmare.
Yeah. It'd be hard to do that.
No, a lot of newer companies were going to a model like that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the new generation wants the time
Well, yeah.
off, the flexibility. And the one thing we have done a lot, we haven't gone to that extreme, but we have really preached flexibility
Yeah.
throughout the organization. So
Good.
it's a little easier to do in the office that people will say, hey, my kid has this tomorrow. It's like, see you later.
See you later.
Work a little bit at night. I've gotten everybody laptops. They can work at home just like they're here.
Right.
Do your work. Do it, or flex time, however you want to do it. It's a little bit harder to do that in DPW, police department, those things. But I have given those department heads the flexibility to say, talk to your people, let them know what you need, and let them work within each other and get it done. And
Dimitri has another comment.
go ahead, Dimitri.
Sorry, I was muted. My current company gives everybody the same amount of vacation. Tenure doesn't matter whether you're there a year, a month, or 20 years. Everybody accrues the same amount every pay period, no matter how long you've been there.
That's the way it is in the school system also.
I don't
Yeah,
see
you
a
don't
problem
get
with
any
that.
You get the same amount.
The only problem you'll have with that is
Transition.
public employment isn't like that. Other towns, other cities, the state, they all seniority counts. It,
Yep. I know, I just wanted to share it.
yeah, no, it's just transitioning
Bragging.
transitioning to that is, it would be,
The transition would be
you would
horrendous.
you would want to park around the corner from your.
We'd have more openings, I can guarantee you that.
Right, but
At least we
here,
give everybody 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Give everybody 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
well, but one transition would be, so here, if I was a brand new employee and I had kids, and you were offering me 1 week for the first year, I would say, no, thanks, bye-bye.
That's where our flexibility comes in.
And negotiations on hiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's,
And there's a lot of that. If I'm hiring a police officer with 5 years' experience, they're not coming in at 1 week.
No.
vacation.
That's another big difference with the education system too. When someone retires, you're generally hiring someone with much less experience, maybe right out of college, so you can hire 2 people for the price. You don't sat them out with what the
Right.
person retiring is earning.
Right.
So there's a lot of it that's
There's a
dependent
lot
on
of
that, but
difference.
we are definitely looking at ways to recruit and retain.
Right. Well, the other way is
Sounds good.
school it too,
Mhm.
where you don't have vacation, sick and holiday. You have a total one
Exactly.
of all 3.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the new employee goes, oh, I get 3 weeks the first year. Yeah,
We call that,
because we
call
put
that
everything
PTO.
together, we
Most of
lumped
us
it
are
all
against
together.
that.
No,
Most of us are.
but you
against
know,
that.
the state
Yeah.
switched to having
We've talked about it.
dependent, sick and sick. And they thought like it was gonna be a benefit and they found out the employees hated that. So now they got rid of that. You just get, it's the same amount of things
Yeah.
because you could only take 40 hours of dependent sick in a year.
Right.
Now it doesn't matter. You get this much sick, fine, that's what you get. You earn it just like annual time.
Take it however you
And
want.
if it's for your wife, your child, yourself, doesn't matter.
That's what I tell my employees, as long as they're using it when they're sick or have a doctor's appointment.
I wanna go home.
Me too.
Do we have any other business?
I have
I was
two
just
questions.
gonna say, is there any
I
other?
do, I have two questions. So the last time from the minutes, did you ever get a chance to look back to see
We
what was
did.
said? Yeah, and what did you find out?
Do you remember that?
What was the
Dimitri?
question?
Remember that, Dimitri had given that percentage or
I think
number?
that's what was said,
That was what was said,
Yes.
okay.
but,
It was.
but what we had figured out, what the number that should have been.
Right.
Was the number that should have been, and it
Okay.
did equal, but what was actually voiced in the meeting. Not right, but it wasn't written the same way the minutes were.
Yeah,
When we looked back, there was discussion through all this, and then there was a summary written, so we can just make note of it.
okay.
So, is there any other business?
I do have one of them. And this is, maybe I can do after, but, got another letter about water samples not being sent on time or whatever, and the bills this time. And that's the second time that we've gotten a letter like that. And then I tell you the remedy is, whatever, that we sent it in late. But what I'm wondering is, your cross-training, I think I've heard you say on things. And we've got all this computer capability, so if something has to be sent in and tested by the state, so you have a record that you're providing safe drinking water, why isn't there a bell and whistle going off at least two places to make sure that gets done on time?
We can look at it, I can look
Just
into that a
curious,
little bit,
yeah.
but as you guys know, we had an untimely
That might have
situation.
I know, I do understand,
And you have to be a certified water person to take a sample,
right, Yeah.
so I can look into that, but yeah, I mean, we should have.
yeah. It just seemed like there should be a backup plan or protocol for that. Your users are feeling like they're paying a high price, which they are,
Sewer one.
for water and sewer. And then, so that's twice, and it's been within a year. And that seems like a lot to me, that something's not, there's not a good backup plan, maybe.
Any other business? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
I,
See you next.
That doesn't need a roll call.
Here it is, sent back.
I'm not arguing.
Right?
I know.